you of what you're actually going to be teaching. Okay, so once you're done reviewing with a three-part drill, then you're going to be moving into teaching a new concept. But remember, you cannot do a three-part drill if you don't have any previously learned concepts. So let's say you assessed your students and they didn't do very well on their assessment, and you decided for your entire class, you're going to start at the beginning of the scope and sequence. So at the beginning of the scope and sequence is going to be the letter C, where the C is saying K. So you're going to go through a step-by-step process with your sequence chart of what you're going to be reviewing and what you're going to be teaching. Now again, if you're starting with the first letter in the scope and sequence, there is no review. You can't start a three-part drill until the first four concepts are taught. So let's just say we're going to start off with teaching something new. So when we go about teaching something new, and it doesn't matter where we are in the scope and sequence, we need to follow some steps and some protocol so the students are successful with this new concept. So let's say, for example, we're going to be teaching them everything that they need to know about the letter C. We're going to be teaching them what a capital looks like. We're going to be showing them what a lowercase letter looks like. We're going to be teaching them the sound of C. We're going to be showing them what it looks like in words. We're going to be showing them how we can form this letter by using our house paper. We're going to be brainstorming words that begin with the letter C. Okay, and so the biggest part that their students are going to be probably unfamiliar with is what we call is our house paper. And this is what our house paper looks like. And we know that our house paper is divided into three different components. We know we have an attic, we know we have the house, and we have the basement. So depending on what letter you were teaching, if you were teaching a capital or lowercase, all depends on what that letter would look like inside this picture. Okay, and we're going to be teaching that to you. So just modeling the steps for you and showing you is that with our house paper, and this is just landscape version of your house paper, and if we were teaching the capital, we always teach the capital outside of the house. If we actually showed it inside the house, it would be very overwhelming and confusing for the students to follow the lines and the directional arrows. So what we do is that we put all of our capitals outside of the house, and as you can see, the letter C is actually starting in the attic, and it has a green starting point in the attic, and you're going to be turning that circle to the left. Okay, and what we like to do in following the steps in teaching letter formation is that we use a green crayon, and we also use a screen. So we place our paper on top of the screen, and the steps that we have the children follow is as follows. So we're going to take our green crayon, we're going to have everybody put it on the green starting point, and we're going to trace over this letter C, naming it and creating it, and it's going to be C says K. We had that do that 3 times. So we're doing C says K, C says K, C says K. Then we put our green crayon down and we get our fingers to feel those bumps. So they're going to be actually feeling it. C says K, C says K, C says K. Then independently, the students are going to take their green crayon and they're going to recreate the letter C over here with the bumps on their own. We're going to be tracing over this, and it's going to be writing C says K. Your students can practice. They can even put pictures up on their paper of different things that can begin with the letter C. Sometimes we use cotton balls to introduce the letter C. We bring in some type of object, and maybe your students are making the letter C out of cotton balls. So once you're done with letter formation, like we said, that you can brainstorm words. Maybe you have a dry erase board up in your classroom. You can have the name of the letter and the sound that it makes. With brainstorming words, sometimes that's difficult for students and sometimes it's relatively easy. So it just depends on where your students are coming from and their prior knowledge. If your students do struggle with language, then I would probably have a box or a bag of items that begin with the letter C with multi-syllabic words, 1-syllable words, 3-syllable words, and whatnot. So for example, maybe you brought in cotton to show your students, and you could write out the word cotton and show them that we're looking for the letter C saying K in the beginning place of words. So in this case, in the word cotton, you can hear the C saying K. All right. So sometimes what you're going to have with your students is that maybe their name is Cindy or something like that, and it begins with the letter C, and they're right. And so we want them to be giving us information that they know, so that we can talk about those things, because this is a very teachable moment. So I always write what they say up on the board, and I might even put like a squiggle around, and I call that this our think pad. So our think pad is things that we need to think about, because this is really good thinking. This is taking knowledge that you have and applying it to something that's new. And in this case, you're absolutely right. We do have the letter C, and the C has a different sound. In this case, this is where C is going to say S. And we're going to be learning a rule about that a little bit later because it really is dependent upon what comes after that letter C of why it says S. So just a little trick, if you have the letter C followed by E, I, or Y, it's going to say S. All right, so it's going to be in our ThinkPad, and we're going to learn that a little bit later. So that's good thinking. So in here, maybe we had an object that they pulled out. Maybe they had an object of a car. Okay, these are words that you're writing, not that they're writing. Again, we're just trying to expand their vocabulary, and this is something that you could keep to the side and in your classroom. Okay, so once you're done brainstorming words, then we would want to practice that sound. Some people like to practice that sound in the air. Some people like to practice on their house paper again, feeling the bumps that are on here, saying C says k, C says k, C says k. Okay, and also we want to tie in some type of literature. Sometimes you can use poetry. Sometimes you're going to be using a book such as this is The Hungry Caterpillar. Maybe you can be practicing the letter C on all the parts and pieces, and they could be making a caterpillar throughout the week as an activity. And so you would be reading this with the students, and maybe every time they heard the letter C, maybe they would clap their hands or something like that. That would make it a little bit more multisensory. And most importantly, once you're done with that, we can be reading this book over the course of the week. We can even have the students maybe even making a bumpy glue letter as such. And the bumpy glue letter, this is for great practice for your students who struggle with reversals. These are I took a marker, I took some colored glue and created bumps on here that they can feel. They could be naming the letter and stating a sound and practicing this at home, saying C says k, C says k, C says k. You can even be making an alphabet book with your students, or they can put a ring around here and have little alphabet cards that they can keep for their own. But we're going to take this letter C, and now we're going to start creating what we call our review deck. This is our review deck. We only have one card. So we're going to put that in our review deck, and we're also going to highlight our phoneme grapheme chart. And once we do that, then we're done with the actual multisensory experience. Now remember, with our multisensory experience, we're going to continue that through our sequence. So then we would move on to the next concept in our sequence chart, which is the letter O. And we would be going through that same format. Brainstorming words, teaching letter formation, bringing in objects, so on and so forth, and then A, and then D. Remember, once your students know the first 4 letters, they can begin to write words. Once you're done teaching C through D, and your students have learned the new concept and they've been applying them, and now you can begin doing a 3-part drill C through D, where you're going to be showing the cards visually, you're going to be practicing those letter formations and an auditory kinesthetic component, whether they're doing it in the sand or maybe on one of your grids in the charts, doing some blending, and also practicing O and A in your vowel intensive. So once you feel that your students are underway, then you would probably want to move into dictation of words. And for you to get your students prepared for dictation of words, you would want them to create a finger tapping strip or a finger tapping hand. All students should be finger tapping words, whether it be a 1-syllable word, 2-syllable, 3-syllable word. So this is a skill that we want to teach early on. And for us to be teaching finger tapping, what I always like to encourage is that you always want to have your writing hand free. Okay, so you're going to be finger tapping with your off hand. I write with my right hand, so I'm going to be finger tapping with my left. And usually you can either have these already pre-cut or pre-made for your students, or they can make their own by tracing over their left hand if they're right-handed. And then they would have a starting point to an ending point. So it would be green, yellow, and red. This is where we start and this is where we end, because there's no more than 3 sounds per syllable. So there's no more than 3 sounds per syllable. Okay, and I'm going to be modeling that for you. If I'm a left-handed student, I'm going to have my right hand here for finger tapping, and again, moving from left to right, because that's the way that we read and that's the way that we write. Okay, some people like to finger tap like this, some people like to anchor their hand and tap like this. This might be a little bit more difficult for students, okay, to anchor their hand. So again, they have to do what feels comfortable for them. But again, always having their off hand ready to write. So if the finger tapping hands are too difficult for your student, what I would recommend is doing a finger tapping strip. And this is just taking a strip with, again, the green dot, yellow, and red, and your students can tap this way from moving left to right. And so I just want to model for you exactly how this will be used. So you could do a lot of auditory strengthening drills with them prior to actually writing on paper. So for example, if I was working with my students and I wanted them to write the word dad, like my dad works at GM. So you're going to be pounding that syllable before you finger tap. So watch this. It's going to be dad. And then we finger tap the sounds within that word. D, a, d, dad. And we pound again. So again, this is just auditory strengthening. We're practicing the art of finger tapping. They don't have to be writing words, but it's nice to have a pencil right in your hand so you're not finger tapping with your offhand. So let's say and we only knew the first 4 letters, so there's not a lot of words that we can write. So we could be stating a word. Our word would be cod. We would use it in a sentence like, I ate cod for dinner last night. And again, I'm going to pound cod, finger tap, cod. So we pound again. So after they're done pounding, cod, then they would write the letters that create those sounds. Okay? Now, what if your students aren't ready to write? What if they don't have fine motor formation? Maybe this is something that they struggle with. So maybe if your students were struggling with letter formation, maybe you're just going to have some of the letters that they've learned out in front of them that you could be using to create words. If I wanted you to write the word cod, again, I can go through that whole process again and saying cod, and I ate cod for dinner, cod, finger tap, cod, or this way, cod. And then I can have you actually spell the word using tiles. So you, in your assessment manual, you actually have little letter tiles like this that you can cut out and laminate. And you could even say it and move it. So you could say this way, cod. And this is exactly just like writing a word. So if your students can do that, thumbs up, way to go. So they could even change things around. If this says cod, how can we make cod say cad? And we can say it and move it. And let's see if that says cad. Cad. Okay. So if we were moving and progressing into actually writing words and being successful on a paper pencil format, we might have some dictation paper that looks like such. Okay. Some of your students might need letters that are dotted on their paper. And as you can see on the left-hand side of your paper, this is where they're going to be writing words, and then this is where they're going to be rewriting words. Notice that we have actually given you sound lines to create words. So as you can see for number 1, there's 3 sounds in this word. All right? So maybe if my students were struggling, I would actually have dotted letters and a starting point to help them be successful. So maybe if I was having them write the word dad, maybe I gave them the first letter. And I would say, here's your word, class. Your word is dad. Again, my dad works at GM. Dad, we would finger tap it, dad, and then we would write it. So when we're writing words, this is why we have our offhand for finger tapping, and we always have our pencil or pen in our hand ready to write. So if the word was dad and I finger tap dad, sometimes I have to go write it, what says a says write it, write it. Okay, and so your students could be doing something like that. So my whole point is that some of your students are going to be tap, write, tap, write, tap, write. Right? And some of your students are going to be able to and then write the whole word. So what we're trying to do is have some differentiation and instruction for our students to be successful. So whatever your students need are going to be made up on this piece of paper. Maybe they're actually using tiles and they're saying it and moving it and just putting them on the sound lines. Maybe all 3 letters are dotted on their paper. Maybe there are no dotted letters on their paper. Again, that's going to depend on each of your individual students' needs. Okay? So after they're done writing their word, instead of continuing on down this sheet of paper, I would always check that word and then do the rewrite. So whether you're using your smartboard and your students are coming up there writing on the smartboard, or you're writing on the smartboard, this is how we write the word dad. Does your paper look like mine? If it does, thumbs up, rewrite your word. Okay? So then the students are rewriting their word. Okay? So let's say we wanted to move on and we wanted our students to be successful and do another word, and the word is cod. So let's say our word is cod. Again, your paper is down, you're going to state the word. The word is cod, using the sentence. I had cod for dinner last night. Cod, finger tap it, however they seem necessary. And it would be cod, and then they would write that word. So it says C says and then d. Again, you're going to have to assist your students as much as they need, but again, you're going to have to pull away too to see if they can work individually. If you need to be assisting your students on every single letter while you're doing a dictation, then it seems as though they need probably some dotted letters on their paper and not so much of a blank sheet of paper. It could be a little overwhelming for them. Again, have them check their work. Once it's correct, then they can rewrite. Okay, and we'll be doing a little bit more dictation as we get into some further lessons and reviewing how we can go through all of this with fluency and reading these words for success. So once we get through our scope and sequence and we get to the letter T, that's when we can start writing some sentences. Okay, so actually at that time, there's 36 words that they can write. And then I believe there's like 7 sentences that we can practice. And then there's also a book that we can read. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to practice some sentence dictation. I'm just going to kind of show you what that looks like. There's definitely a protocol we want to follow for sentence dictation. So with our sentence dictation, we can have a paper that's going to be customized according to our students' needs. So with our sentence dictation, there's always 2 number 1s or 2 number 2s. And the reason that we have them doubled is that we do a lot of visual cues first, and then we have a rewrite because we don't rewrite with our visual cues. So we want a clean copy of that. On the right-hand side of your paper, you have COPS, and the C is for capitalization, O is for organization, P is for punctuation, and S is for spelling. This is definitely going to come in handy when they're doing their rewrite. Okay, so if I wanted to dictate a sentence to you, such as the lid is hot, we might be giving them some visual cues that look as such. Okay, and what I made are some word lines. Okay, and if you look at this paper, you should be asking a lot of questions to your students after you kind of teach them what these visual cues are about. First of all, if you look at number 1 and you see this, what we call a mountain, okay, we put a mountain for capital letters. If you need to have a mountain in the middle of your sentence, that's fine for somebody's name. You can also do that. But a mountain is big, and so that's a good visual cue. And you can also see that I have some that are double underline and then some are a single underline. Anytime you see a double underline, that means that it's a red word. And we're going to be learning about red words next. And you know that red words are words that you should know automatically. These are words you cannot sound out. These are words we're not going to be finger tapping. These are words that you're going to have in your classroom on your red word wall. These are going to be the words such as does. No matter what you teach your students, they're going to have a hard time sounding out the word does or the word once. Okay, so these are, again, words that we need to memorize. So looking at your sentence right here, your students should be able to tell you how many red words are in your sentence. Okay, so you can also see that I have 4 words in my sentence. So I have 2 red words and I have a total of 4 words. I need a capital letter and this box at the end. This is to remind you that you need punctuation. Okay, I always tell them there needs to be a dot in the box. So remember, dot in the box, whether it be a question mark, whether it be a punctuation of a statement, just going to put a period there, or an exclamation point. There's always going to be a dot in the box. Okay, so just looking at that, again, going back, it's 4 words. If this was too long for your students, what could you do? You could fill in some of the words. Maybe you're going to fill in the red words. Maybe that's something that they struggle with. Maybe you're just going to concentrate on the green words. Can the students finger tap? Absolutely. If they need to, that's what it's there for. I really like to encourage them to use whatever strategies that they know and that they need. Now, if this is still too difficult, where even if you filled in the red words and they were not successful, possibly you could have little word cards such and put them in envelopes for your students. And then they could take out the word cards, lay them out, and then they'll have to put them in order. Okay? And they'll have to make some choices. All right? So maybe the sentence is, the lid is hot. Again, listen again. I'm going to pound that sentence for you. The sentence is, the lid is hot. And then you would pound it with me. The lid is hot. And then you would pound it on your own. Okay? And then I'm going to also point to the sentences, so you're going to know that each line represents a word. Okay? So it would be, the lid is hot. And then you would do that with me. The lid is hot. You would do that on your own. Okay? And then what you could do is actually find the cue cards and you could lay them on the specific line. So the lid is hot. And then you're going to have to make some choices about what dot goes in the box. Did I ask you a question? Did I tell you something, or did I ask you a question? And so when I said the lid is hot, I told you something. So when I tell you something or it's a statement, we're always going to put a period in the box. Okay? So that's what our punctuation. And then we could practice reading it, the lid is hot. What would be awesome for them to also do is to actually rewrite that sentence, to get some letter formation practice, learn about capitalization, punctuation, learn about spacing and all of that. So then they could actually use their COPS at the end to see if they have all of those things in place. Ideally, of course, our goal is to have their students write the whole sentence independently. But again, give your students what they need. So going back to the beginning, and if I wanted them to write that sentence, the lid is hot, again, the lid is hot, again, going through that pounding, pointing to the lines, and then filling it in. When you're rewriting your sentence, though, we do not write the capitals inside the mountain. That goes outside of it. So we know that the is a red word. The lid, again, if I needed to, I could do lid. Oh, I know how to spell is. I-S, and then hot. I know how to spell hot. Hot. And a dot in the box. Okay? So again, you could check your word. You could see if you had capital. Did you have a capital where it needed to be? Yes. Was it organized? Yes. You had neatly spaced. Punctuation, I have that. Did I spell all my words correctly? Yes. And if you checked all of those off, then you can come back here and then you could rewrite your sentence. The lid is hot. And once that's done, then you can go back through your cops and recheck it. So again, seeing if you did that correctly. The, perfect, organized, good spacing between my words. If you need finger spacing, that would be great. Punctuation, yes, I didn't forget my punctuation, and I spelled all my words correctly. Those are my 2 red words. I looked at my red word wall, and my green words, if I needed to go back and finger tap them, I could check that, and so I have 100% of my sentence, and I'm good to go, and we can even read that sentence, the lid is hot. So now we're going to be talking about red words, and we know that red words are those non-phonetic words that take up 13 to 15% of our English language. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a red word wall in our classroom, and we're going to learn how do we memorize these words to put into our long-term memory. So there are some steps that we're going to take, and again, a protocol of steps that we're going to be following so we're successful in memorizing these words. Now before, with our green words that we know we can finger tap, cat, at. We know we can finger tap catnip, and it would be at, second syllable, and ip. Those are easy. Those are what we call our green words, words that are go, go, go. So these red words are words that we have to stop and think, how do we spell this word? Sometimes it's a strategy that we do is that we may write it 1 or 2 or 3 different ways to see which, oh, this doesn't look right, or I need to write it a different way. And those are just strategies that we all use. So we're going to try a different strategy, which we call arm tapping, to learn our red words. Okay. And before I teach you that arm tapping strategy, I also want you to see that new red word that we're going to be learning in a sentence. So the red word that we're going to be learning today is going to be the word the. You can have red word paper that has a house on it. You can have red word paper that has dotted letters with starting points to help your students. Again, it all depends on what level you're teaching of what your paper is going to look like. So you could have a blank sheet of paper, okay, with just the lines, with no house, as well as with no dotted letters. What we also want to do is make sure you understand what that word is, okay? And so our word the, we can see it in the beginning of sentences, and we can see it in the middle of sentences. So I have it capitalized as well as lowercase. So what we're going to do is that we're going to actually learn how to spell the word the accurately. So we're going to take a few steps that you have in your green flip chart. All right, and the first thing that you're going to do with your steps is you're going to number your red word, okay? And this little line up here in your left-hand corner, you can put the number 1, okay? And I'm going to model for you what I want you to do to spell this word. I'm going to take my red crayon, and I'm going to put it on the top of the letter T, and you're going to trace over it. And it's going to be T, next letter is H, and the last letter is E. Okay, now I want you to pick up your red crayon, and you're going to trace over the word the as well. And you're going to be naming the letters as you create them. So it's T, H, E, the. All right. Once your paper is done, you would want your students to hold that paper up so you can see that they wrote that word. Imagine if you didn't have it dotted and your students wrote the word incorrectly. You would want to catch that before they actually went through the process of learning that red word. So now we're going to be moving into arm tapping. And with arm tapping is a skill that's going to be different from right-handed students to left-handed students. Okay, so I'm going to put my paper down. I'm just going to model for you what that looks like. So if you're a right-handed student, you're going to actually take your right hand and you're going to cross the midline and put it on your left shoulder. And you're going to take your paper And you're going to crook your arm a little bit because you're going to be moving from left to right. You're going to be making an impression on your body as well as onto your brain. So if the word was the, you're going to be arm tapping as such. It's going to be T-H-E, back to the top and underline the. Okay? Naming our letters as we're tapping, underlining left to right. Okay? If I'm left-handed, I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to hold it, but I'm going to be starting at my wrist. So I'm going to take my left hand, I'm going to put it at my right wrist, and I'm going to be tapping the letters T-H-E, the. Naming my letters, not our sounds, and underlining from left to right. You have to figure out with your students who's right-handed and who is left-handed, okay? I always like to have somebody in the front of the room who's modeling for the left-handed students. That might even have to be you. Okay, most of your students are going to be right-handed. So you're going to want to model for them. And again, what this is doing is it's reinforcing that left to right formation. Okay, this is the way that we read, this is the way that we write. This is the way that we read, this is the way that we write. So we want to really instill the fact that right-handed students take your right hand, place it on your left shoulder. Left-handed students take your left hand and place it on your right wrist, naming the letters. So now when we're arm tapping, notice that I am looking at my letters. I'm not looking around the classroom, I'm not looking at the teacher, I'm not looking at other students, but this is multi-sensory. We have to use all learning pathways. We're going to be seeing it, saying it, and feeling it. Okay, so all together we're going to arm tap, and it's going to be T-H-E, the, T-H-E, the, T-H-E, the. Okay, and I just modeled the way that I actually arm tap because I'm right-handed. So once you're done with arm tapping, what you're going to want the students to do is to take their paper or their booklet and place it down on their desk and take their writing finger and put it on the starting point. And you're going to probably want to model what behavior you would want to have your students do. So in this case, I would start at the top and I would trace over the crayon bumps 3 times. So I'm going T, H, E, the, underlining from left to right. Okay, now sometimes you want to make it a little bit more creative, so sometimes I tell them to whisper, their red words, so they're doing T-H-E, the. Sometimes I have them shout it, T-H-E, the. Okay, so as long as they're doing it 3 times, that's all that matters. So they're tracing over the letters, naming them, and underlining it left to right. Okay, after they're done doing that, you're going to get your screen back and you're going to place it on top of your red word so they can still see through it. And they're going to feel the bumps from the screen and also trace over those letters. Okay, again, you could do some different things with them, like you could do a cheer or chant with them. Give me a T, T, give me an H, H, give me an E, E, what's it spell? The, what's the red word? The. Okay, you could have them, again, sometimes I have them do it like an old person, and they're going T, H, E, the. Right, so I'm doing it in a normal voice, and they're doing T, H, E, the. So again, you just want to have some variations, so it's a little bit different to help the students be a little bit more engaged, okay? Once you're done finger tracing it with your screen, then they're going to take their red word paper and they're going to flip it over to the back, okay? And on the back of their red word paper, there's 3 lines. Space where they could be writing their red word. So you're going to tell them to pick up their red crayon and they're going to write their red word 1 time. So they're going to take it and you're going to show them what your expectations are. If they need a house on the back of their red word paper, feel free to do that. And then they would be taking their booklet or their paper and they would be holding it up so you could give them a thumbs up. So they need that thumbs up before they write it 2 more times. And so when they're listing something, they need to go down. If we are writing a sentence, we go across. But because we're listing our red words, we're going to do the next 2 spaces. Okay, so then they're going to continue and write it 2 more times with their red crayon, no screen. They're going to take their red crayon and they're going to place it down and they can show you all 3 of them. They can show it to a neighbor. They can give each other a thumbs up, whatever protocol you have in place for checking their red words. Once they're done with that, then they're going to pick up their pencil or their pen or whatever they're working with, and they're going to write a sentence using the word the. Now, this could be quite difficult for some students, is writing a sentence or coming up with a sentence. So that creates a lot of modeling on your part. Remember that you had already written some sentences earlier. Feel free to have your students copy them, and maybe they can even dictate a sentence to you that you could write, or they're just sharing sentences with one another. But ideally, our goal is for them to write a sentence like, the dog ran away. Now, what's great about having your students write their own sentences is that we're trying to check and see, number 1, Can they pick up the red crayon, find their red word within their sentence that we've been focusing on? Number two, are they using correct punctuation? Are they using correct spelling? Well, I really don't pay attention too much to the spelling of my other words. I just really want to pay attention to the spelling of my red word. Now, this is where we have inventive spelling. If you haven't taught these concepts yet, they should not be responsible for writing those words correctly. And so if they spell any of those words wrong, that's okay. We really want to focus on the letters and sounds that we've taught them in our green words, as well as our red words that we've taught them as well. So they can turn to a neighbor, they can share their sentence with one another. Sometimes I go around and everybody can share their sentence with the class. Again, all depends on the time that you have in your classroom. I'm going to touch briefly on all of these components in the Learning Centers and decoding section. This is something that you're going to find yourself doing